We all have as caregivers. We always, of course, just need to do a little bit of housekeeping. So what we'd ask is if people can try to speak up. This room, unfortunately, is long. It makes it a little bit hard to hear if you're in the back, so if you can speak up. But we want you to share if you have questions or concerns afterwards. Of course, there's continuing education credits for this, and I think that'll be sent out afterwards, so you can get the credits for that if you need CME. What we'd ask is if there's a form typically that comes out with that also, that's an evaluation form, we would ask if you could fill that out too, because we use that to try to make Schwartz rounds better and to try to help to get information back to Schwartz so they understand what we're trying to do here with our program. As I said earlier, this is the Kienle Players presentation, so I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Cheryl Del Sega, who's going to introduce the cast and the play and explain to us what's going on.
Hello everyone, it's great to be here with you and doing a production with the Kienle Players. We always enjoy coming to Schwartz Round. I'm just going to briefly tell you that this Medical Readers Theater is based on a short story by William Carlos Williams, who is very much a physician who is ahead of his time. The actual setting of this story and the play that was scripted from it is 1938, so you're going to see some things in there that were would not be real today or would not be happening today, but you're going to see some things that he was very prescient in his addressing of concerns. He was in an era where house calls were normal and you didn't question your doctor and there was kind of a medical model. He wrote about a lot of things like immigration, racism in medicine, doctors getting irritable, burnt out, turnover, and so on. So he really did, one reviewer describes him as the person who wasn't afraid to write about the great unmentionables. Mm-hmm. So without further ado, A Face of Stone.
You're going to introduce it.
Oh, you want me? Yeah, I can introduce. I thought we would do this at the end, but nonetheless, our wonderful doctor, who is just called Doctor in the play, John Mesmer, who is a real-life doctor. Our mother, who is also just the woman, I think, in the play, is Roberto Chardulo Diaz DeAndre. Did I say it right? Our husband is Danny George. I could do the gong, and today's role of narrator will be played by me because Lisa Erdman is not able to be with us. And our wonderful do-everything creator of the set and the design and the sound effects is Kayla Kress. And we also appreciate Lori Ricard taping it for us at the last minute. So. As they entered his office, the doctor glanced at the clock on his wall and heaved a heavy sigh of frustration. A hurried lunch again, he thought. He motioned them to sit and noticed as they did so, the man made no attempt to help his wife with her chair.
What is it?
He asked, looking at the child asleep in the woman's arms.
It's the baby.
The doctor looked at the man. Ah, he thought, one of those fresh Jewish types, the presuming poor whose faces change the minute cash is mentioned, who take advantage of kindness at the first opportunity.
My brother told us to bring the baby to you. We already had a doctor, but he was no good.
Of course.
No good? How do you know he was no good? How long did you see him?
Were you paying him?
It doesn't matter. What did you want to see me about?
I want you to fix the baby, Doc. My brother says you're the best baby doctor out here, and this kid is sick.
Well, put it on the table and take its clothes off.
Neither the man nor his wife moved.
Put the baby on the table and remove its clothes.
Still, the woman wouldn't move. She sat there, staring at the doctor, holding the baby tightly to her chest. Immigrant, he thought. Italian, probably. She looked dirty, like her husband. Her face and hands grimy, her nails as black as her hair.
If you want me to examine the baby, you'll have to put it on the table.
Give me the baby.
No, I hold her.
The woman continued to stare at the doctor with no expression at all on her face, a face of stone. Animal distrust, the doctor thought. She's like an animal that senses danger and is on guard against it.
Give me the baby.
No, I hold her.
And the doctor knew from her accent and grammar that she had not been in this country long.
Give me the baby he wants to examine.
Listen, Do you want me to examine the baby or not? If you don't, I really...
Doc, wait a minute, okay? Just,
You look at the throat.
All right. Put the baby on the table and remove its clothing.
But the woman still wouldn't move. After a moment, the doctor started twirling a pencil through the fingers of his left hand. He turned to the husband.
Never mind. What's wrong with her?
she's getting thin, Doc. What do you think's the matter with her?
What do you mean, thin?
Thin.
The doctor turned to the woman. She flinched, but didn't move.
How old is she?
4 months, 1/2.
I see. And how much does she weigh?
13 pounds, 1/2.
13 and a half pounds, Doc.
That's not really that bad. How have you been feeding her?
My wife is nursing her.
I nurse.
How often do you nurse? I see.
When she's hungry.
And how often is that? How often is that?
She probably don't know, Doc.
What kind of labor did she have?
I don't know, regular, I guess.
Was this her first baby?
Oh yeah, this was her first.
The doctor made a few notes on the new folder in front of him and then stood, walked around his desk, and leaned against it, facing the woman.
Is the baby ever sick? Does it have a fever? Does it ever throw up?
Sometimes she throw up.
How often? How often?
Sometimes.
Every once in a while.
My milk, no good?
Not necessarily. Let me see the baby.
The doctor leaned forward, reaching for the baby. It took one look at him and let out a wild scream. The woman clutched the child to her breast, stood, and turned for the door.
Baby's scared. We go now.
Oh, Christ.
Don't be scared. It's not gonna hurt you, okay? I'm sorry, Doc, but she ain't been in the country long and she's afraid you're gonna hurt the baby.
The man turned and went to his wife.
Do you need the baby?
He took the child from her arms and carried it to the table, removed its clothing, and stepped back to give the doctor room to examine it. The doctor looked at the still screaming infant and could find nothing wrong with it, other than the natural results of foolish, irregular routine and probably insufficient breast milk. He handed the child and its clothing to the mother, who huddled by the door and dressed it.
There's nothing wrong with the baby, but she does need to feed on a regular schedule. You explain that to your wife.
You got it, Doc.
And the baby will need some formula to supplement the mother's milk. Get some, and see to it the baby gets it on a regular schedule.
Okay, Doc.
We go?
Yeah, we go. Thanks, Doc. You're a good guy.
The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wad of crumpled bills.
How much do we owe you, Doc?
$3.
Boy, Doc, I'm a working man. I can't afford.
Please, we go.
Okay, look, Doc. I want to be fair because you've done right by us for sure, but I really can't handle more than a couple bucks.
That'll be fine. Now, I really am very busy, so...
Sure. Here, Doc. Here you go.
The man laid the money neatly on the doctor's desk, turned, and joined his wife at the door.
By the way, Doc, if we need you any time, I want you to come out to the house and see. You gotta watch this kid.
Ah, the doctor thought, but of course.
I don't know. Where do you live?
1317 Marsh, out in West End, near the old warehouse district.
Near the dumps, the doctor thought.
I'll come out if you give me decent warning. Call me in the morning. And don't call me there every time the kid gets a bellyache. Or because her wife thinks it's dying, or at dinner time, or at 2 in the morning, or in the middle of a snowstorm. I'm telling you now so you'll know. I've got more than enough to do already.
Okay, Doc, but you come, right?
Only under those conditions.
We go now.
Yeah, it's a deal, Doc. Bye.
Goodbye.
And the man and his wife and their child turned and left. But sure enough, on a Sunday night at 9 o'clock, with the thermometer at 6 below, and the roads like long black skating rinks, they called the doctor at his home.
Nothing doing.
But Doc, you said you'd come.
I'm not coming out there tonight. I won't do it. I'll ask my associate to make the call, or maybe some good younger man who lives in the neighborhood. But I'm not coming over there tonight.
But we need you, Doc. The baby's very sick.
I can't help it. I'm not coming.
Who in the world are you talking to like that? His wife asked. You mustn't do that.
Leave me alone. I know what I'm doing.
But my dear.
I know what I'm doing.
4 months passed. On the first warm day in April, about 20 women came to the doctor's office, all with babies. He started at 1 p.m. and by 3 o'clock was still going strong.
Anybody left out there?
He asked the woman he thought was his last patient. Oh, yes, she said. There's a couple out there with a baby.
Oh, Lord. It's 3:30 and I still have house calls to make.
Hello, Doc.
And there they were, the same fresh Jewish grin, the same face of stone, still holding the baby. But the child had grown to twice its former size. At first, the doctor didn't remember them, but only for a moment.
Oh, hello. What can I do for you?
And make it snappy.
I just want you to look at the baby, Doc.
Oh,
Listen, Doc, we've been waiting out here 2 hours.
Oh, for Christ.
all right. Put it on the table. Come on.
And as the man did so, the doctor noticed a cluster of red pimples near the man's right eyebrow, reaching to the bridge of his nose. Like bedbug bites, he thought. No doubt he'll want me to do something about them before they leave, too.
Well, what's the matter now?
It's the baby, Doc.
I had assumed as much. Well, what's the matter with it? It looks perfectly fine to me.
And it did. About 10 months old with a round, happy face.
Yeah, but the body ain't so good.
You examine all over him.
Of course.
Do you realize what time it is?
Shouldn't we take her clothes off?
I suppose.
So the wife began to remove the baby's clothing, and the doctor sat down and started taking notes.
How old is it?
How old is it?
10 month. Next Tuesday, 10 month.
Her expression, no expression, never changing.
Are you still nursing it?
Sure. She won't take bottle.
Do you mean to say that after what I told you last time, you still haven't weaned the baby?
What can we do, Doc? We tried, but she just won't let go of the breast. You can't make her take the bottle.
Does she eat?
Yeah, a little, but she won't take much.
Cod liver oil?
She takes it all right, but she spits it back up a half hour later. We stop giving it to her.
Orange juice?
Oh, sure. Most of the time.
So she's been nursing and eating a little cereal, and that's all?
Yeah, that's about it.
How often does she nurse?
I mean, whenever she wants. I mean, sometimes every 2 hours. Sometimes she just sleeps like that.
Didn't I tell you to feed her regularly?
You can't do that, Doc. The baby cries. My wife gives it to her.
Patience.
Why don't you put it in a crib?
My wife won't give it up. That's the way she is, Doc. What can I say? She won't do no different. She wants the baby next to her so she can feel it.
The doctor turned to the woman, still standing at the table.
Have you got it undressed?
You want shoe up?
He stood and went to the table.
Excuse me.
He pulled the child's shoes and socks off together. He picked the baby up by the ankles and the back of the neck and carried it to the scales. The woman followed him closely, watching every move. The baby, apparently much calmer than her mother, merely sagged, smiling in his grasp. He looked down at her clean, happy face and returned her smile in spite of himself.
20 pounds, 4 ounces. What do you want for a 10-month-old? There's nothing wrong with her. Put her clothes back on.
You examine her first.
The doctor's face reddened slightly, but the woman ignored him.
She's too thin. Look her body.
Very well.
The doctor returned the child to the table, fetched his stethoscope, and went rapidly over her chest.
She's fine. No rickets, no problems. Now please get her dressed. I have a lot to do this afternoon.
The woman hesitated.
She all right?
She asked, but only with her voice. Her face remained completely expressionless, her eyes a brittle, pale green. The doctor found himself searching his memory for another like it. One he had seen in a painting, perhaps, Montenegro or Botticelli. He shook his head.
Yes, but for God's sakes, get her off the breast. Feed her exactly the way I told you to.
No, we'll take bottle.
Fine. I don't give a damn about the bottle. Feed her from a cup, from a spoon, any way at all, but feed her regularly, that's all.
The doctor turned and went to the sink. While he washed his hands, the woman dressed her baby, clutched it to her chest, and walked to the door. Her husband hovered near the sink and caught the doctor as he turned to go to his desk.
What?
Doc,
He said, too quietly for his wife to hear.
I want you to examine my wife.
What the hell do you think I am? Don't you know that...
Look, we waited for 2 hours, Doc, 10 minutes. Just look over and see what's the matter with her.
The unmitigated audacity, he thought. But he turned and looked at the woman still standing at his office door, her baby in her arms. What a creature, he thought. What a face and what a body. He considered the tear in her dress, a triangular rip above the left knee.
Sit.
He gestured for both of them to take seats. The husband did so immediately, and the wife, after a long, curious look at both men. What the hell, the doctor thought. No use getting excited with people like these, with anyone, for that matter. All you can do is what you can do. He took a seat at his desk.
Go ahead. What's the matter with her?
She gets pains in her legs, Doc, especially at night, and she's got a spot near her right knee. It came last night, a big glue-looking thing.
Has she ever had rheumatism?
The man shrugged.
You know, go to bed with swollen joints, lasts about 6 weeks.
Both men looked at the wife.
Have you had rheumatism?
Doc, she don't know.
The man's face colored slightly. The doctor had noticed it before, but could not remember the exact circumstances. He turned again to the wife.
Tell her to open her dress.
Open your dress.
She did so, slowly and reluctantly, after handing the baby to her husband. She turned and faced the doctor, who came around to his desk to where she stood.
Let me see your legs. The left one first.
She untied the white rags just above her knees and let her black stockings fall to the floor. Her legs were oddly bowed, like Turkish scimitars, flattened and somewhat rotated on themselves.
You had rickets late in your childhood.
She didn't answer, just stood there. Her legs, while they did not look weak, were as ugly and misshapen as youthful legs could be in a woman so young. The doctor noticed a large discolored area near her left knee.
That comes from a broken vein.
Yeah, I thought so. You know, she has them on both of her legs.
That's from carrying a child.
Oh no, she had them before that. That's the way they've been since I've known her. Is that what makes her legs hurt?
I don't think so.
Doctor took each of the woman's legs in his hands and looked at them carefully.
No, I don't think so.
Well, what is it then? I mean, it hurts her real bad, especially at night.
Well, in the first place, she's bow-legged as hell. That throws the strain where it doesn't belong.
Yeah, I know.
And look at her shoes.
She was wearing a pair of fancy, high-heeled slippers, evening wear. They were worn and badly broken down.
I don't see how she can walk in them.
That's what I told her, Doc. I wanted her to get a pair of shoes that fit, but she wouldn't do it.
Well, she's got to do it.
He turned to her.
Throw away those shoes. Go get shoes with flat heels, Cuban heels if you must, but new shoes. How old is she?
Her husband again reddened slightly.
24.
Where was she born?
Poland.
Poland. Are you sure?
Yeah, why?
Well, 24 years old, you say. That's different. That's probably the explanation for her legs. She must have been a little girl during the war, maybe 5 or 6 years old. Is that right?
He turned to the woman.
Is that right?
She didn't answer, or wouldn't, or couldn't.
What did you get to eat?
If she heard him, she gave no sign. She turned to her husband.
Did she lose anyone during the war?
Everyone, Doc. She lost everyone.
How did she get over here then?
She came over here 4 years ago. She has a sister.
So that's it, the doctor thought, watching her take her baby from her husband's arm, watching her fussing with it, cooing at it, paying no attention whatsoever to anyone else in the room. No wonder she's built the way she is. What she went through over there.
What are we going to do about her pain, Doc?
Get her some decent shoes. So do that right away.
Okay, Doc.
She could be operated on for those veins, but I wouldn't advise it. Not yet anyway. Get one of those woven elastic bandages, a 3-inch one. They're inexpensive and they'll help.
Doc, can't you give her some pills to stop her pain?
No, not me. No, but I think you should get her teeth looked at maybe if you want to, that kind of thing. And damn, okay, I'll give you something. It's not dope, you understand, but it'll only help if there's some rheumatism connected with the pain.
The doctor turned to the woman and then waved to get her attention.
Can you swallow a pill?
How big?
Look, she swallows an aspirin when I give it to her. She usually puts it in a spoonful of water just to dissolve it.
Once again, the little man reddened, and the doctor saw for the first time the nature of the love he felt for his wife and the extent of her reliance on him.
They're pretty big pills. Look, they're blue. That's a coating that keeps them from upsetting your stomach.
Let me see.
She held out her hand to the doctor, and he placed a few of the pills in her palm.
For pain in leg.
Yes.
She looked at the pills in her hand for a moment, then back at the doctor. And for the first time since she had entered his office, several months past, she smiled.
Yes, I take them.
The end. Our usual process is to have our actors stay in their roles and take questions from any of you that have thought of things during. I have plenty of questions I can ask. I'll get us started. I know during rehearsals, just the whole context of care in that era and the way Williams writes. You know, I have copies of the short story this is based on over there. It's very gritty, and yet many of the things he discusses were confronting today: immigration, racism, social justice. So John had to sometimes act in ways that might not have been his authentic self, and we had some discussions about that. So did you want to make any comments?
So it seems whenever I try out for a show that involves a doctor, I get cast as the doctor. I don't know whether I look like a doctor or act like a doctor or speak like, I don't know what it is, typecast. But they're always doctors that are different than what I actually. I've played a drunk, a murderer, a philanderer. These are not my qualities. So it's interesting. That's one of the great things about acting, is to be able to inherit another body to get that mind and act that out. But when I first had to say, get her off the breast, I'm thinking, oh my God, really? Seriously? You know, keep nursing her for crying out loud. But you know, you have to overlook that. And being brusque, you know, and I know doctors in that era really worked from morning till night. Some well-known paintings and photographs of doctors who've smoking cigarettes, of course, and you know, exhausted. I mean, GPs did surgery, they delivered babies, they made house calls, did pretty much everything.
Well worth $3.
That was at least $3. unless you're insured.
How about if there's any questions from the audience? Any things you observed or anything that you would like to know from any of the actors?
Why is it so scary to go to the doctor?
Oh, could you hear that in the back? Great.
Why is it scary to go to the doctor?
Yeah.
Not for me.
I mean, I may answer this one, I guess. It's, I think from the woman's perspective, she was just so untrusted. She, I don't know what the word is, but she just didn't trust people. I think she went through so much and found it really hard, you know, to trust someone else with her baby. And I don't know. I think it comes down to trust, right? And I think today too, people sometimes just don't trust someone else, even if they have all the training and all the background. They don't trust, and they may think, you know, maybe they know better. So I think it comes down to lack of trust. I think in her case, it definitely was.
I think also people sometimes they're either afraid something's going to hurt, or the doctor's going to find something that they didn't know about, or they're going to ask them to do something that they're going to find difficult to do. And actually, I have been a patient because my eye doctor years ago saw a dark spot in my retina. Sent me for a big workup. I ended up at a Wills Eye Hospital thinking I could have melanoma. Turned out not to be, but that there was a little, even though I was familiar with all the procedures and everything, sitting there and just waiting for the ophthalmologist to come in and say, we don't think it's cancer, was, you know, that was scary, and it was a huge relief.
I have a family story that your role as mother reminded me. So I asked about why is it.
Oh, we need you to speak louder.
Oh, I'm
We can't hear
sorry.
you in the back.
I have a family story. I'll say really loud. I'm sorry. I have a family story that I was reminded of during your story. So, as an African American family, there's a story of my great aunt who had a baby. This is my grandmother's sister, and it's interesting. The visiting nurse came to the home to administer an enema, and apparently there was a significant loss of fluid, and the baby died. And my great aunt never had any more children. And it's interesting, there weren't very many children born on my father's side of the family. I don't know how that story influenced. He's an only child, and then there's another only child. There weren't a lot of children born. And you would think in the 30s, you would have many more children. So this would have been in the late 30s. That fear, even though I wasn't there, that suspicion and that fear that something might happen to the baby is real. And it's, you know, like he writes about racism in medicine, and there just seemed to be this disregard for the baby. That was part of the lure, that the nurse didn't get in trouble. I always wondered who she was. Did it matter? Like, I'm just curious how that played out. So that part of that fear is still with me today, and I ended up being a visiting nurse, you know, and I just wonder what that connection is between the story and my ending up being a career choice. But aside from that fear that generational fear is still here with us today.
And I think there's a strong class dynamic in this story too, where the family is clearly in a lower tier. So they have a lack of knowledge, lack of social grace to negotiate with the doctor. There's a lack of chemistry because of the class disparity. And so it's like you have to fight and claw for anything. And there's this lingering ambient fear that you're not going to get treated well, treated right or fairly. You know, a good doctor can maybe dispel that from the outset. It took a little bit of time, obviously. John's a slow learner. But ultimately, they did find a point of connection that sort of eradicated the class distinction. But it took some time.
I think that, I don't know for sure, but I don't think that ethics and patient interactions and patient care were taught that way. I think it was, you hoped that the people who went to medical school had that compassion. But you mentioned race. I think being a black American was horrible then. It's not that great now in terms of the way you're treated. Being anything other than a white European Christian was also an issue. So, and you would never know what prejudices this doctor had when you first went to see him. Generally, somebody told you that I was the best one for babies, for what that's worth. But even now, you don't know if the doctor's going to judge you because of your weight, judge you because of your color, judge you because of your whatever, education, insurance, and so on.
Kimberly?
I just wanted to follow up on what you said in the front row and your own personal experience. And so I'm thinking about the mother, and she was a child during,
World War I. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
It was during World War I. She went through the war.
Yeah, and so what she might have experienced at the hands of physicians, and then so the fear that might cause, and also the fear, the terror about what's going to happen with her child, and those two fears colliding. And I'm just struck by the name of the play, Face of Stone, and just thinking how immobilized that could make somebody. I mean, she brought the child, but she's got terror pushing on her from both sides. It seems that's a really untenable position. And
so I'll let Roberta answer this after I hear your thoughts. What do you think made the woman smile? That's a great follow-up question to Kimberly's comment. What made her smile finally, do you think? Only sign of emotion throughout the whole thing, at the very end. What made her smile?
It was after the doctor smiled at her baby.
Ah.
Like, I didn't know if that was what
Okay.
opened her up. I was trying to say, was it something in particular that he said? Was she waiting to hear something? But like, I don't know. He couldn't help himself but smile at the baby. It kind of cracked his also face of stone a little bit. They were human.
So that was kind of the point where things changed. How did you find yourself feeling towards the doctor when you finally smiled at the baby?
I was like, I felt like he just kind of let himself be in the moment, we all come into, like, all that stuff we were hearing was in his head, but they were feeling it. And I just imagine their experience often was being used, like for him, this is just a routine, another person. For them, what it probably took to get there, to come to this appointment, to think that it was going to even be worth it, because they're probably used to, most things don't go their way, most people don't end up helping them. It's kind of like the closest thing can experience is like when you call customer service and you already have like a chip on your shoulder because they're not going to help you get like what you need, but in a much more realistic, much more serious way for them. So to feel like finally I had broken that, like, okay, this person does see me as a human being and wants to help reassure me or be someone who cares about me as a whole person.
I can say as playing the character, when we first ran these lines in the beginning, I got choked up. I couldn't go on. And I think that the change for the doctor was, I can't get choked up now. The big change for the doctor was realizing that these weren't just a couple of immigrants who, were bothering him, but she actually had a lot of stuff happen to her and he felt bad for her. And she probably felt like he was reaching out to her to help her.
Yeah. So Roberta, why did you smile at the end, do you think? Why does your character smile?
Well, I actually have to say just before I answer that, it was actually I found it a little hard to smile because the whole play, it was so, so sort of expressionless and also, sort of like understanding the dynamics, which is probably more than what she would have understood at the time, but understanding the dynamics, it's hard not to get a little bit angry, right, at what's going on. And so I got a little torn between, not torn, but it was a little bit hard to smile just because at some points I thought, okay, is he only treating her well now because she's gone through something very traumatic and difficult, or has he truly, gone through this journey of seeing her as human, regardless of, you know, where she comes from, regardless of class, you know, regardless of race. Like, and I think those two things are a little bit different, right? Because, you know, what if she hadn't gone through all of that? Like, would it be justified for him to treat it that way? And so I had those things playing in my mind. But I think that the doctor smiling at the baby, I do think that was a big turning point. I agree, because he was looking at the baby as a human, as a tiny little thing that, you know, is just the most sort of like pure of you know, of human, right? And so looking, regardless of any prejudices or anything like that, he was looking at that baby. And I think as a mother, I'm not a mother, but I would imagine that as a mother, that would be something quite touching to see, you know, someone looking at your child like that. But I do, yeah. But then I think that was one of the reasons I smiled. But I wouldn't say that the smile would have been, you know, just because my pain was not going to be better. I don't think it was quite because of that, because I think that's not, that this doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, the doctor transitioned from, you know, having prejudice towards not. I think he may have been, you know, I feel bad for him, therefore I'm going to do something good. But I think, you know, when you connected with the baby, I think that would be a sort of turning point for the mom. Because that was the most important thing for her, right? That's like, you know, who she had left, the baby and her husband. Very loving husband.
Right.
Well, okay, let's go to the husband. Looking at the role of the husband, was he out of line and, you know, pushing and asking for more? I mean, the doctor is a GP. They went to him for the baby, but suddenly, you know, Zviani is asking for care for other things. Did you think it was he inappropriate, or was John just too sensitive? Was the doctor just too overworked to be empathic towards him?
I had the impression that the husband knew all along that his wife was the one that needed care and nurture. I mean, I've had children. I'm sure, you know, that postpartum state. There's a whole lot going on. You know, I'm sure there were times that my husband thought I was neurotic and I like knew it but didn't want to. There's a lot going on, but he had compassion, you know, for his wife, and he knew that she needed to be able to trust, you know, that someone else could care for her baby the way she wasn't cared for, and you know, push. Like, that's hard to do, to say, like, hey, you know, and he had to feel, like, saw her trust, like, her breaking down and maybe giving him a little bit of trust and saying, hey, maybe she'll be open to it. I have to seize on this while I can, because most of the time she's not.
Yeah, the baby was healthy, so I think the baby was the ticket to get in, and then it was, hey, doc, how can you look at my wife? That happens to me all the time.
The baby's well-being is wrapped up in the mother's well-being, you know?
Do you think this was enough to change the doctor permanently, or was it just in the moment and he's going to go back to kind of the factory of healthcare in that era and just, you know, churning out the visits?
I'm sorry, I don't want to dominate, but I do recall an element in the story where you kept saying, like, these little inklings, like, and something reminded him of something, and something reminded him of something that he saw. So it does make me think that it was like, oh yeah, I've seen this before, and sometimes there's more under the surface. Hope that it was gradual change.
That's great feedback, because you're talking about little moments of him making them not just two widgets, right, going through the machine, but seeing the human side of them. Yeah.
And that he had noticed, like, thinking back to other times before, and he's like, I remember seeing this, and I was putting the pieces together. That it's more than just the physical.
What kinds of things, interactions did you observe, or behaviors that you think our care for immigrants might be better now, or continuing the same as the little scenario you saw here, the dynamic of a healthcare visit with a husband and wife who are, well, we don't know that the husband was an immigrant, but we know for sure that the wife was. And the doctor, we know, was a pediatrician or whatever. William Carlos Williams just supposedly was writing his biography endlessly, right, when he was writing these stories. But what do you think? Have we made progress, or do you think have you seen these kinds of interactions in the office, or in the setting, healthcare settings still.
Can I actually make a comment?
Sure, sure.
So, some of you know, but I'm originally from Brazil, and so my first language is not English. And when I think one thing, so, you know, when I moved to an English-speaking country, going to the doctor was quite hard because obviously I couldn't understand very well what the doctor was saying. And I feel like that is very, it takes away your power as, you know, an individual, because you just have to, you know, put your entire trust in someone and you don't understand what they're saying. I think one thing that would be, that has changed is, for example, having access to an interpreter. And I think, you know, it may not seem that huge, but to actually be able to understand what someone is saying about your own body and your own health, and then be able to voice your concerns and voice your fears, which, you know, I guess if you want to, obviously if you feel comfortable enough, that's a whole other story, but I feel like that's a big thing. Having access to someone who speaks the same language as you, it makes you feel as empowered about your own body as you would in your native language.
Really good point. And as we saw her, we didn't know if her blank face was because she didn't understand a word of what was being said to her, whether, as Kimberly said, you know, maybe she had an experience with a doctor when she was growing up or during the war. We don't know. And John didn't really know how well she spoke English, so he did the thing that we all see, you know, go divert to the husband and talk to the husband about the wife, or the husband about, you know, the brother about the sister, or the child about the parent, however it plays out. So certainly that was one thing that seemed very true to life. You know, you do a lot of work with immigrant populations. Any similarities or benefit, the way things have progressed to a better place?
Well, I think, and I kind of want to ask Kayla, because Kayla has been part of the refugee initiative, the student leader for that initiative, but I think what we still see today in our work with Syrian refugees and Congolese refugees is what manifests at the clinic is a failure of larger systems very often. It was astonishing for us when we started working with the refugees, for instance, that food stamps have a sunset period of like 6 months, and then people are just have to fend for themselves. And it's unbelievably confusing if people are unemployed and that English isn't their first language. The students can help them with things of that nature. And then that trickles down, I think, to a distrust of the doctor. And students have had to accompany families on doctor visits and not only translate, but reassure and help navigate. So it's a lot to ask of doctors to be the people who fix all of these cascading social problems that manifest in the clinic. But Kayla, did you have any reflections on that from your work on the clinic?
Yeah, I guess I'll echo what you said about language being so important. Like, that's definitely a change we've seen in clinics, having access to these iPads and things are even more.
Can you speak up a little bit?
Language is more accessible than it's been in the past. But I think it's still a major problem, and it's a major systemic problem if you don't have access, if the iPad's not charged, if one thing goes wrong, all of a sudden the cascading effects of that are building distrust. So in some of our work with like Congolese refugees, for example, with COVID-19 protocols, social distancing, not all of that information was coming out in the languages that were relevant. Unemployment forms were not like readily accessible in other languages, so there's still an inbuilt systemic lean, I guess, or bias against people who speak other languages in this country.
A lot of folks who have, as you called it, the generational trauma of a refugee situation, like the Syrian refugees have been through a civil war, they've lived in refugee camps, so when they get here, there's already distrust of institutions and distrust of experts and people who are in leadership positions. Those things all manifest in the clinic as well.
It could be frustrating as a provider to get some of the services and things that are needed. That's a major frustration, and bringing all of the people, social workers, and whatever they can help, and sometimes you're just stuck. You just have to settle for unsatisfactory care. Medications are costly.
So the title of this is A Face of Stone. So Whose face was stone? Was only one person, or was there more than one person with the face of stone, or where do you think that title comes from? I see you nodding in the back. Do you want to say something?
That's the doctor's face or medicine,
Yeah.
I think.
What makes you say that?
She's an immigrant. She went through a war. She doesn't think in this language that he's talking in. First of all, her gestures are different. The smile doesn't even possibly mean the same thing at the end because it has a different frame of reference. He's burned out, selfishly absorbed. It's his narcissism, for lack of a better frame, that I think is the stone that has to be chipped away at, not her. It'd be too easy to say it's her.
Thank you.
I'd like to opt for some compassion for the doctor. Talk about systemic pressures. I mean, yeah, it was easy to dislike you, John, as the doctor, but how would it feel to go from dawn to midnight and not get paid a living wage? I think that we could have some room for some compassion for the doctor as well as for the other two people who were in difficult situations. Like the husband was in an untenable situation. He was trying to be a man, whatever that means, right? But certainly the gender codes. And he's got to negotiate as just a working man with no power in his own right between this woman and the child and then the man, right, the doctor. That's a really hard position to be in. So I think there's room for compassion for everybody in this play.
The pressures are still there, they're just different than they were then. I'm not running off to do house calls. I used to do house calls. But there'll be demand, more patients need to be seen. Somebody calls with a problem that can't wait for tomorrow, you've already filled your clinic, and then you have to deal with the employees who have to stay to help you, because you can't put charges in and all that sort of stuff. Or somebody will come for a routine visit and have a lot more problems that they need to take care of, so you run late, and then you have to apologize to people, and then you've got to do the electronic record precisely the way it's supposed to be done, or it doesn't get done correctly, and then that's frustrating. So the problem, and in some cases there's family pressures. The family wants you home, and I have a bunch of messages to take care of, and thank goodness I can have a date with the electronic record at night and finish up those things, because that's what they call it. It's a date night with the electronic record. So, and my wife is an oncology nurse, and she is working, she's got the same thing, she's working all night, she works weekends. The demands for all of us in the healthcare system are great, are exceedingly great. And it really takes a lot to drop the attitude when you go in with the next patient. It takes a lot to get in the moment and say, okay, this person has nothing to do with all this other stuff. I've got to be there for that patient, and it's exhausting.
Just a show of hands, how many of you think the doctor was burnt out in this scenario? Okay, so doctors now are burnt out, right? Because John's kind of telling us it's a very similar situation going on now.
I mean, all of you in caring capacities must recognize that when you give of yourself all day long, you often don't have anything left at the end of the day. And then families experience that burned out, their empty tank. And that's a hard thing. And so I think some providers at all parts of the healthcare system, whether you're a nurse or a doctor or a chaplain or a social worker or whatever, to save yourself, you just don't give. You just can't do it sometimes. There's just nothing left, or it hurts to do it, and you avoid the hurt.
We are out of time, but let's show our appreciation for these actors and directors. And if you would please fill out the evaluation forms. Cheryl, do you want those to be paper up here?
The papers are just the playbill, but there are a few copies of the short story of The Face of Stone, if anybody would like it.